when an act of kindness turns into a movement that's one of the biggest in the country.
All I can tell you is that God broke my heart in the streets of America. Really, any major disaster in the U.S. or around the world, anywhere in the world, Convoy's responding. We have a team of almost like a firemen and women who are just ready to roll at a moment's notice.
This is CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sands. Today, I'm honored to have the founder, president, and CEO of Convoy of Hope, HAL Donaldson, with me on the podcast. Now, Convoy of Hope is a global, faith-based, nonprofit humanitarian organization that works with communities facing poverty and hunger. According to Forbes, Convoy of Hope is among the 50 largest charities in the United States. And this interview couldn't be more timely, as Convoy of Hope is on site right now distributing food and supplies to communities in need across the Southeast who have been severely impacted by the massive tropical storms and hurricanes. Now, the damage in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee, and the surrounding areas, well, it's nothing short of devastating. Hundreds have lost their lives, and many are still missing. And Convoy of Hope is on the scene. Now, Keep the Faith is doing its part too, and Keep the Faith Charities, that's our charity, is partnering with Convoy of Hope and other boots-on-the-ground nonprofits in providing relief. And I urge you to help us out and go to KeepTheFaith.com and make your donation. And again, that's KeepTheFaith.com. Now, I want to mention that this interview was done before the hurricanes hit, so Hal won't be speaking about what they're doing in the Southeast, but you're going to find this incredibly inspirational. He's also going to be talking about his book, What Really Matters, How to Care for Yourself and Serve a Hurting World, and that's available right now. But first, let's take a look at this message.
This is Donna Cruz on behalf of Keep the Faith Charities, a 501c3 organization with an urgent message for you. The destruction caused by the hurricanes has been overwhelming. Thousands have lost everything, their homes, cars, and personal belongings. From the rolling hills of Tennessee to the mountains of North Carolina, through the plains of Georgia and across the heart of Florida, entire communities have been wiped away, and the loss of life has been heartbreaking. Now more than ever, your help is urgently needed. We're asking for your support to aid the victims of this disaster. Your contributions to Keep the Faith Charities for hurricane relief go directly to trusted, on-the-ground Christian organizations providing much-needed comfort and care to those affected. Please make your tax-deductible donation by visiting KeepTheFaith.com. Your gift will provide relief to families in crisis. Together, we can make a difference, one act of kindness at a time. Go to KeepTheFaith.com now. Keep the Faith Charities is a not-for-profit organization.
Hal, welcome.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
I couldn't wait to do this interview because you and your organization mean so very much to us and so much to folks all across the country and around the world. And I can't wait to dive right into this. And I'd really like to look at this interview from two different sort of part A and part B. Part A is finding your purpose, and then part B is not losing yourself in that purpose.
Yes.
Okay?
Very good.
Because I know there are a lot of folks who are Christian caregivers, a lot of folks who are going to be watching this who give a lot of their time and effort to causes, and sometimes you can get wrapped up all in that. So let's start by talking about your story. I'd like to go back to the very beginning, to that time that you were a young man, and what happened in your home that really changed your entire life.
Yeah. When I was 12 years of age, my parents were on their way to a business meeting, and they were hit by a drunken driver. My father was killed instantly. My mother was seriously injured, would be in the hospital for several months. And My parents didn't have insurance, and the man who hit them didn't have insurance, and so the family was forced to survive on welfare. And many days, we went to school without sack lunches because the cupboards were bare. Other times, we had holes in our shoes. And it really was the kindness of a local church that wrapped their arms around. I'm the oldest of 4 children. They wrapped their arms around us, and they showed us they loved us. And a family took us in. All they owned was a single wide trailer, but they allowed us to live with them and their children. So at one time, there were 10 of us living in a small trailer, and we did that for about a year. But it was the kindness of people in that local church that really, I think, kept me from a life of bitterness. But David, when you're raised poor, you begin a quest not to be poor anymore. And that was certainly the journey I was on. And I thought the best way to escape poverty was through education. So I went out and worked my way through college, earned several degrees, and I found myself writing books in my 20s. A number of books, and one of those book projects took me to Calcutta, India, where I had the opportunity to interview Mother Teresa. And in the course of that interview, Mother Teresa, she just asked me, she said, "Young man, let me ask you, what are you doing to help the poor and the suffering?" And I figured I probably shouldn't lie to her. I told her the truth. I said, "I'm really not doing much of anything." And she said, "Well, everyone can do something. Just do the next kind thing that God puts in front of you." And I'll just tell you, I just came back to the States, and I knew that some things needed to change in my life. Priorities needed to change. My quest in life needed to change. And certainly not to be spooky, but one day I was praying that prayer. I said, "God, make some changes in my life. I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled." And I felt really directed to do something quite unusual, to travel to 8 cities and to live in the streets for 3 days and 3 nights. I went to Miami, I went to Atlanta, Chicago, D.C., New York, major cities, walked the streets after midnight with a hidden tape recorder. I rode with the police on the midnight shift. And all I can tell you is that God broke my heart in the streets of America. I came back home and one day loaded up a pickup truck with $300 worth of groceries and started giving them out to working poor families. And that was the start of Convoy of Hope.
So what was it that what was it that was inside of you that just said, obviously having Mother Teresa tell you what she told you? I mean, I can't imagine those words when they hit you, how they resonated and brought you back here and sent you on this mission. But what was it when you came back that you knew, you just knew in your heart of hearts that God had a greater purpose for you?
Yeah, I think it really happened. I was working with some missionaries there, and I had gone to write a book for them, and they're the ones that opened up the door for me to interview Mother Teresa. And before they would allow me to write a word or to even conduct an interview, days on end, they had me working in the feeding line. It was like 15, 20,000 people. And, you would be just ladling food into bowls. And all I can say is that when you look into the eyes of desperate people and you do it by the thousands, it changes you. And when I went back to my hotel room there in Calcutta, honestly, I just wept. I said, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough to help other people. I have been served as a teen. People wrap their arms around me, but who am I wrapping my arms around? Really, it was no one. It was all about building my bank account and building my career. And I just really became convicted of that.
So when you started feeding some of these families, what did you see in their eyes?
Desperation, hopelessness. I think I began to understand how powerful hope and compassion are. Compassion gives people hope that a better tomorrow is possible. And I believe that people have to have hope before they can have faith. It starts with hope. But a lot of times that hope starts with an act of compassion. And, I have been blessed as a writer in my 20s, and I had resources, and I wasn't doing enough for other people. And, I never thought that I would start Convoy of Hope. It never was really the agenda. It was all about just doing something. And, God took that spark, if you will, and decided to make something much larger of it than I ever dreamt possible.
And tell me about the impact that your grandparents had on you.
Yeah, I think my grandmother, I think she recognized in me what I would call reckless ambition, that I was about building my career and, again, building bank accounts. And my grandmother gave me some really sound advice. She said, Hal, just make sure your heart's right. Because if your heart's right, God can do things that you never even dreamed possible. That was great advice. And she really was warning me not to do what my grandfather had done. My grandfather had made some very poor choices in his life. He was a national religious leader. And he, in her minds, in her words, he became full of himself. And when he became full of himself, he no longer was hearing God's voice. And he began to really focus on his career. And I think she feared that I was going to head down that same path. My grandfather ended up losing his family. He lost his health. He had a stroke. By the time I got to know him, I was about 8. And half his body was paralyzed, and he died shortly after that. And I think she was just warning me, don't try to make things happen for yourself. Don't be reckless with your ambition. But focus on what God is asking you to do.
So you brought up the word hope several times, and hope obviously means much more to you than just a 4-letter word. Describe to me what hope means to you and why it is part of the name of your organization.
Yeah, for me, hope is the belief that things can improve. When I was a teenager, I just couldn't understand why the man who hit my parents, why he could walk out of jail 48 hours later with no consequence. And he had sentenced our family, to a life of poverty. It just didn't seem fair. And I think there's a lot of injustice in the world. There is. And as a young person, I would ask the question, God, where are you in all of this? Don't you care? Questions like, God, did you cause my father to die, or did he die for a reason? So you ask the hard questions. Hope is not allowing unanswerable questions to paralyze us. Hope is believing tomorrow can be better than today. And for me as a teenager, there was this young couple, the ones that took us into the trailer, and they saw me as a 12, 13-year-old boy, and I was struggling. I just was. A lot of questions for God, becoming angry. And this man's name was Bill Davis. He became almost like a surrogate father. And he came and he threw his arm over my shoulder, and he said, Hal, listen to me. Don't allow the tragedy of your youth to become a lifelong excuse, because where you start in life doesn't have to dictate where you end. And it was words like that gave me hope that maybe things could improve, maybe they could get better. And, I've dedicated my adult life, probably the last 30 years, to just doing everything I can to make life a little bit better for people in the United States and around the world.
So when you were out initially helping to feed those families, and tell me about, I understand there was a story that had an incredible impact on you, and that was you were asking God for answers, and I believe somebody handed you an envelope with a check and a note. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we had just started handing out food and groceries, and my wife and I, we'd given everything we could. We had maxed out our credit card. I've made a pattern, David, through the years. I write notes to God. I write questions to God. I give prayer requests, and I'll stick it in my wallet. And I had written a note to God, and I just said, God, if we don't hear from you, that you're with us by the Fresno, California outreach, we're going to pass the baton on to someone else and go and do something else. And at that particular outreach in Fresno, a relative stranger, I think I'd maybe met him once, came up to me and he handed me an envelope. Again, we were feeding several thousand people that day. But he handed me an envelope, and inside was a check for $25,000, which was amazing. I mean, when you don't have two nickels to rub together, that's a big deal. But inside was a note that they had written, and the note said, "God is with you," and they had underlined the word "is." God is with you. And I can tell you from that moment on, I've never looked back. It was like a voice from heaven. I'm with you. Just keep going. Keep pressing on. I've got something planned. I've got something in store. Now, I'll be honest. I'm glad that God didn't show me everything that he had in mind, because it would have freaked me out. It would have freaked me out that he was, establishing something that was going to be so large and so expansive. But that day, he kept us going.
You mentioned that you wrote these notes and stuck them in your wallet and so forth. Tell me about the power of that. What does that do?
Yeah, I think it's a reminder that we are reliant on God. I think early in my certainly in my vocational life, I thought everything relied on me. And I wish, as I look back, I wish I had prayed more and worked less. Quite honestly, I do. And I think the notes do two things. One, it keeps us reliant on God for answers and for solutions and for miracles. But I think the second thing is it almost, in some respects, holds God accountable because I'm putting my trust in him. Scripture tells us, ask and you will receive. I ask for answers. I ask for miracles. And someone asked me just a few weeks ago, does God, are there times that God doesn't answer? And I said, I cannot remember one time in these 30 years that God hasn't either performed a miracle or given me the answer that I was looking for. So I guess I learned a long time ago that God is a very good reader. He can read. And I think he pays attention to what we take the time to put in print.
So how difficult was it to give up your life as a journalist and dive into the hope business?
Yeah, I didn't give up writing. I've never felt like I was giving something up. I certainly walked away from a stable income in the early days of Convoy of Hope. My wife had to work. I had to write in order to pay the bills, not only for ourselves, but for the ministry. So, I never felt like I walked away from writing altogether. It's still part of who God made me. So that wasn't a sacrifice. But I think a lot of times people do make sacrifices that God is not asking them to make. And that certainly was where I was at in my 20s and early 30s.
So let's talk about Convoy of Hope. How did that come about? What was was it a build-up process to get to the organization that you've created? Was it a lightning bolt moment? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, to give God the glory for what he's done. So in these 30 years since that pickup truck, Convoy of Hope is now the 35th largest charity in the United States. And that includes hospitals and everything you can imagine. And, again, never set out to build a charity. And I think one of the things that we keep telling ourselves is that it's not about building the organization. It's about being a catalyst for the movement. It's about mobilizing people to share their faith in a practical, tangible way. And, so when it's not about you, you really give God room to do some miraculous things. And Convoy of Hope has, through these 30 years, we have time and again, we have put together strategic plans. We've put together goals. And I just have to tell you that God's plans have always been bigger than ours, bigger than our faith. If anything, we've been able to pivot forward time and again. Katrina and the pandemic, we would start off with one idea at what we thought we could do, and God would multiply it 10 times. Ukraine, we started off with what we thought we could do, what our faith would allow us to do, and millions of dollars later, God multiplied it 10 times. It's just kind of how this has happened. So I like to say that I believe that God had a plan. Our job is just don't mess it up. He's written a script. Just don't mess it up, because it's a beautiful story.
So, for folks who are not that familiar with Convoy of Hope, let's give them sort of the elevator pitch. What is the organization, and what are one or two of your absolute biggest victories in those 30 years?
Sure. We are internationally, we're involved in children's feeding. We feed nearly 600,000 children a day. We provide jobs training to tens of thousands of mothers every year, and training to tens of thousands of farmers, helping them increase their yields. And it's those three working together, those three ministries, outreaches, that are really bringing community transformation. We're also very involved in disaster response. Really, any major disaster in the U.S. or around the world, anywhere in the world, Convoy's responding. We have a team of almost like a firemen and women who are just ready to roll at a moment's notice. And we also are involved in community outreach. And so we work with churches, resource churches across the country, helping them just really serve the needs of their community. So that's, in essence, a quick overview of what Convoy of Hope does.
So let's switch gears here a little bit. And you've written this book, What Really Matters. And I'd like to know why you wrote this book and what you would like to accomplish with this book.
Yeah, it really comes back to, David, when Convoy of Hope was experiencing meteoric growth. And, we had topped the number of, I think it was 250 million people that we'd served. We'd been able to distribute $2.5 billion in food and supplies. When those numbers began to hit the airwaves, I was getting bombarded, inundated with calls and requests for meetings, because people wanted to know what's the secret sauce to growing an organization or growing a church or growing a business. A lot of business people wanting to know what's the secret sauce. And, inevitably, I would tell them that the secret, it really begins with you, that you have to be healthy as a leader. You have to be healthy spiritually, physically, and emotionally. And if you're healthy, then you're giving God a foundation that he can build upon. If you're not healthy, then the foundation is flawed, and God will only build so tall. So for me, it began with getting healthy. I found myself at the age of 50 in a hospital operating room with heart problems. And it was because I was trying to do too much. And, when I was recovering from that heart situation, God really began to speak to me that I was doing too much, that I was doing things he wasn't asking me to do, and it was time for me to get focused on the ministry of Convoy of Hope. When I got healthy, watch out, things took off. And so, that's why I wrote the book, because so many people were asking, and they said, well, we know those things, but what's the secret sauce? What's the business thing you did? And I said, no, it really comes back to the health of the leader. That's where it begins, and the health of the leadership. And so I thought, I'll just put it in print, and I'll be very vulnerable, transparent, and give people some very practical tips on how they can change their priorities and really change their lifestyle.
Well, what is it on an airplane? They always tell mom to put on her mask first, right?
That's right. That's right. Well said.
So I want to talk. Let's talk directly to those folks out there who are on a mission, who maybe give it all. Maybe they're a caregiver. Maybe they're a therapist. someone who rolls up their sleeves and gives so much every day, every week to others, and maybe at the expense of their own health, maybe at the expense of their relationship with their own family. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. When were you in that sort of situation? Tell me a story about that and how you were able to identify that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it began with me being in northern Kenya, in a drought-stricken area, passing out water and supplies to people who are really desperate. Meanwhile, my daughter breaks her arm back home, and I can't be there to bring her comfort. Another time, I was in Afghanistan talking on a satellite phone, and my wife is telling me that my daughter scored her first goal in soccer. And, there were so many stories that I was missing of my children, my 4 daughters. And, but what really got a hold of me, David, was when I found myself in an operating room. And when God began to speak to me like I was doing way too much. And here's the revelation that I had. That Jesus didn't meet the needs of everyone. He didn't feed everyone. He didn't heal everyone. He just did what his Father asked him to do. And what was lacking in my earlier life, I was doing great things. Really helping people in some desperate situations around the world, in the United States. But I was doing things that necessarily God wasn't asking me to do. And, I think likewise today that we need to, prayer needs to be a very important component to compassion work. Whether you're a therapist, whether you are someone who's handing out food, whatever it may be. Prayer is important. We need to ask God, is helping that person something you want me to do? And be ready and willing every time. Be willing, but be willing to ask the question. Because I was traveling all over the U.S. and around the world, but I was also neglecting my family. And fortunately, I'm married to a superstar wife and amazing kids, and God was merciful. But I learned way back then that, again, I was making sacrifices God wasn't asking me to make.
So for someone watching this right now and they find themselves in this situation and they just think, I cannot do enough. I think about this mission that God has me on morning, noon, and night. There's just so much to be done. Yeah. There's so many people to help. What would you say to them?
Well, God doesn't expect us to work 110%, You are not disappointing God if you're not working 110%. First, understand that. God is not expecting that from you. But I think it's also important to understand where expectations are coming from. In my case, I was living under the chains, if you will, the handcuffs of other people's expectations. I was certainly driven by compassion, but I was also driven by other people's expectations for my life. And I think it's important to be honest with yourself and be honest with other people and be willing to say no. God's not asking me to do that. The book, as I said, is filled with tips, and I'll just maybe share a couple of things that I did that I thought were really transformational. One is that I no longer took dinner meetings. I was doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner meetings, and everything was moved to lunch or breakfast, because dinner was my family time. And so no more dinner meetings. There are probably rare exceptions even today, but I'm really a breakfast, lunch meeting person. The second thing is at 8 o'clock at night, there's an alarm that goes off, and I'm no longer going to worry about tomorrow's issues. I'm not going to take on difficult or strenuous issues after 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock and beyond is my family time, is God's time. And so, because what happens as leaders, we can be trying to solve problems past midnight. And we're lying awake in bed at 1 or 2 in the morning. And what we're doing is we're actually cheating from tomorrow. We're cheating tomorrow because we're trying to solve problems late into the night. We're not getting enough sleep. A third thing that the book talks about is vacations. We made vacations sacred. There was nothing that was going to interfere with family vacations. And at the beginning of the year, we would map out the entire year when there would be seasons of rest and vacation and rejuvenation. And for example, one time I received a call to go to the Oval Office with 5 other leaders, and I declined because it was during a family vacation. And I wanted my daughters to know that they were more important. I remember interviewing in my journalistic days, I remember interviewing Ted Turner, the media mogul who started CNN. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Turner, so, what's your key to success? And his response was leisure time. Leisure time. And I took that to heart.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you've interviewed some really interesting people between Mother Teresa and Ted Turner.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Well, we only have a couple more minutes. What is it that we can really be in thoughts and prayers over regarding Convoy of Hope and your months and year ahead?
Thank you for asking that, David. We are continuing the work in Ukraine. We are working right now in places around the world, really hot spots around the world where the needs are great. We are on a quest to feed 1 million children a day, and so that's another big topic in front of us. But I would like to just share, we have a vision for opening distribution centers around the country, and we opened one just a few months ago in Sacramento. We have one here in Missouri. We're opening one in Atlanta and other places because we believe that more and more churches are poised to meet the needs of their community, and if we can resource those churches and to help them do it, we certainly want to do that. So those are just several things that are in front of us that are big ticket items.
Well, Hal, thank you so much. The book is called What Really Matters. It's available now, and you are such a blessing. Your organization's such a blessing, and we really appreciate the time that you've given us today.
Thank you, David. Appreciate your podcast very much.
And thanks again, Hal. Such an inspiring story. I want to encourage you to please send your donation right now. Go on over to KeepTheFaith.com, and of course your donation is tax deductible, and it's going to go to Christian organizations with boots on the ground right now, including Convoy of Hope. And please do pick up a copy of Hal's book. It's available right now wherever books are sold. This has been CIA Contagious Influencers of America from the producers of Keep the Faith. Please do rate and review us. Check out our website at KeepTheFaith.com and also our podcast website at ContagiousInfluencers.com. And be sure to make that donation. There are so many hurting people needing your help right now, okay? This has been CIA Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sams. Until next time, go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living it in black and white. I'll see you next time.